So I've been having some interesting conversations, both on air actually and off air with folks through like DMs, but also just kind of in general. I had actually a couple of good phone conversations with some guys that really take their strength and conditioning programs very seriously. They've very much invested time, money, effort into making sure they are on a very solid program to support them in their endeavors. These guys some of them are amateur. One of the guys is an amateur athlete. Two of them I would consider tactical athletes in the sense that they make their living behind a gun. And they work on some special operations types teams in law enforcement. One guy's beyond that and working in the military world. And then actually a couple of strength and conditioning coaches that work with all those types of populations as well as, general pop. And that meaning, I guess, just general health and wellness or general population, those civilians that are just trying to move better, look better, and feel better, in their life. And the conversation really centered around kind of what we're seeing or what has been a trend for a long time in programming, but also seemingly in programming, because I don't see everybody's programs, but I see how people are selling their programs digitally, whether that's in social media or online or whatever. And the emphasis or the value that is placed around these maximally loaded movement patterns, or let's just call them exercises. Let's call it that, because that's how we're going to define. I think the exercise is defined by a particular name, not necessarily the movement pattern, which we'll come back to, not to confuse the conversation. But things like the deadlift from the platform, full barbell deadlift, barbell back squat, backloaded barbell back squats, bench pressing with the barbell, like the barbell being like a very big and more important piece of this. And while I love the barbell and I love all those exercises for a lot of different reasons, I think people get lost and they place this huge emphasis on both coaches in a lot of cases, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. But more particularly the consumer or the user of those exercises as a means to achieve maximal strength, power, efficiency, and performance for whatever their goal is, right? And whatever their job specific duty or their sport specific duty or just their recreational specific thing that they're trying to train. And I've said this before, and it's been maybe a little bit controversial on the show, that I think the deadlift, barbell deadlift, full barbell deadlift is kind of an overrated exercise. And I don't mean that in that there's not a ton of value in it. There is. I just think it gets a little bit
overprescribed?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I don't want to say overprescribed. That might be a little bit of a stretch. I just think it gets so much attention.
Glorified.
There you go. Glorified. I can't remember the term I used before that really pissed people off. I think maybe I said overrated. I mean, obviously there was context to this that we went into a long discussion about, but those types of things, I see them popping up and I see people, again, I think what I'll say is overvaluing them in the body of work that they're doing within their programs. I'm not saying they don't work, but my question would be is like, how do you define the work? Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And do you have to do that thing? And while you are doing that thing, whatever it is, could you be doing it better? Or is it actually doing, right, the work that you think that it's doing and getting you the result that you think it's doing? Or could there be some other things you may want to explore and the reasons why?
Well, and I think are you prepared to perform that movement in that range of motion from that intention? Like you have to have preparedness even, and this is can be speaking to the more intermediate advanced person of your body may not currently be prepared to do that, even if it was in the past, to deal with those leverages, to deal with that range of motion, that very specific range from the floor that could not fit your morphology, could not fit your mobility. Maybe you took a flight, maybe you're stiff that day. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be prepared specifically for that. It may not be.
Yeah, I think that word preparedness is super important. And we use this term a lot, and that is nuanced. This really isn't nuanced. The term prepared, it can be defined very, very specifically to, does your body have the ability to do it? That could be one part of the preparedness. And that could be on any given day, like as you just mentioned, to just anywhere in your fitness and health and fitness or performance journey. The other part of that is do you know any better? Like, do you have awareness around this? And I think this goes back to what I was saying is like oftentimes if you bought a template online, a workout template online, or you would almost expect to see barbell deadlifts, barbell back squats, barbell bench press in there, right? I mean, this makes sense. Again, great exercises for a lot of reasons, but they often show up very, very quickly in there. And if you haven't learned anything else and you continually focus on the one thing, hopefully you're getting better at that thing, and it is providing the benefit, that you're looking for from it. But what if it's not? And why isn't it? And going back to the awareness piece, are you even aware of what you are or aren't doing, what your ability is or isn't? And that starts to break down into your morphology, your mobility, right? Where you are from an objective, evaluation for the day. Is my head even in the game? When we talk about like how much effort or intention am I putting into this workout, this particular movement, this particular set, and this particular rep during this time. And I think a lot of programs miss that. And as a result, a lot of exercisers coming to the table, even some of the most fit people, strong people I know, are still maybe a little bit disconnected from like all the other things they could be doing to get the same type of result that the intention of, say, again, these, let's just call them the big three movements, will get you. And I think there's a lot of these movements that get maybe you use the word overprescribed. That might be a good way of looking at it. I just think people could use more variety, particularly at the beginning of their journey, so that as they get down further in their journey, they are not completely married to this particular, like, again, I keep bringing it up, the barbell deadlift from the platform. Like, yeah, great movement, but is that all you can do? Is that all you should be doing? Could you be doing as much or more or something completely different to obtain the same or even better result for whatever your performance goal is?
Well, and I think, if we're speaking to the person who's maybe newer in their exercise journey, I'm all about skill acquisition and treating these exercises like a skill, like a movement you want to practice and learn. But if your first few weeks of exercising, you're spending so much time trying to figure out the barbell deadlift from the floor, and that's hindering the adaptation effect from building some strength, building some tissue quality, building some muscle, building up your nervous system, like motor control, things like that you could be getting from kettlebell Romanian deadlift or something like that, that's more in your wheelhouse, that it's still teaching that motor pattern. It's eventually going to lead you very nicely into something like the barbell deadlift from the floor, but it's allowing you to adapt and progress from the start versus spending those first 3 weeks, I don't know, with a PVC or a light bar and not really actually being able to load it to your standard or what your ability. So
yeah, I think what we're trying to build here is, you nailed one of them, which was skill. We're trying to build some skill. That's all skill acquisition is a massive part of success in the long run here. The other part you're trying to build is, again, I think I mentioned this, is awareness. And there's something to be said for doing some isolated movements to build awareness, skill, and strength in areas that you may not have those yet, or you may not be familiar with how to build strength in. Again, one of the benefits of those big, complex, compound movements is how much they impact, right? When you look at like the total body impact, starting from the central nervous system all the way out to how many muscles, right? Joints and muscles are involved in making those exercises or movement patterns happen. But if you don't have awareness there, and I mean that like cognitively, but also, from a deep neurological perspective, neuromuscular perspective, again, you're trying to, in a sense, this is the way I always put it. Maybe some people get this analogy and they don't. I'm an old guy, but it's like trying to load the latest Apple operating system onto a Commodore 64 computer, right? It just doesn't have the bandwidth to handle all of that, right? It doesn't have the RAM. It doesn't have it just doesn't have the ability to onboard all of this stuff. Now, at the same time, if you are doing those types of movements, the body, unlike the Commodore 64, is going to learn this stuff, and it's going to start to build more capacity and the ability to onboard this stuff. So going back to like the isolated movements, things like machines, where people are like, no, don't do that because that's not functional. Well, we'll talk about that in a second, right? Things like machines, things like more isolated movements. There's nothing wrong with a dumbbell bicep curl. There's nothing wrong with a dumbbell chest press, even though you can't load it as much as you maybe be able to load the barbell, the barbell bench press. There's nothing wrong with what you said, like maybe a single leg Romanian deadlift to build what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And again, that awareness around what's happening, as well as the skill around the capacity, so that when I go to load into one of these, again, bigger, heavier, more compound, complex movements, I'm actually able to download that onto the motherboard, if you will, and get the reward out of it, while reducing potential risk, or also and the risk being not necessarily injury. I think that everybody wants to go straight to that. The risk of, number one, not getting the result you're looking for, right? Because certain parts of that pattern, that movement pattern, are being loaded in ways that are not going to be beneficial for you in the long run. And secondly, the risk being what I just said is, over time, putting yourself in a position where you won't have the ability to do that really well, yet you're continuing to push heavier loads, more volume, more intensity down the road, which obviously can be problematic, and we won't go down to all those reasons.
Well, I was just having actually this conversation with a client, I think yesterday, about, needing to, you can't truly integrate until you learn how to isolate the components of it, right? And the human body is very, very interesting, even from a mindset psychologically, but then from a movement pattern standpoint of, it's going to figure out a way to get the job done that you're asking it. So if you're asking that dumbbell to go from the floor to your chest, and you're asking your body to do that, it's going to figure out a way to get to you. But a lot of this balanced movement around the joint, firing the muscles maybe that we want to work, or we want to stimulate, or we want to be even just balanced in the movement so that we're not overloading a specific tissue that we don't want. Like, you have to learn, I was working a row with her, and she was feeling a lot of tricep. She was not getting, and she's been getting some inflammation and different things because of that, because she wasn't actually able to activate her lat in the row, even though that was the intention. Her form looked great. The movement looked great. It was a compound exercise. There's multiple joints moving, but actually being able to activate your lat to contract the muscle, to move the modality with that intent, versus just getting the weight from point A to point B.
Right. Like sticking the bar on your back, take a big deep breath in, tighten down through your trunk, tighten up your belt before you got underneath the bar, right?
Cinch it way too tight.
Cinch it tight. Like, take that deep breath, right? And then sit down and stand back up. That is really the simplest terms. That's what a barbell back squat is. But the reality of it is it is what it is. It's a very complex movement. There's a lot going on there. And you just nuanced, I think, a little bit of like kind of what some of those things are. The more advanced, more experienced, more seasoned, the guy that gives a shit that's doing this gets what you're saying, right? When they get under, they go through sort of their checklist. And one of those checklists is being able to put the checklist together from the get-go, so you understand what you're actually checking off on the list. It's not just a what's the word I'm looking for? You're not just laying it and going, oh no, I got all the things. It's not it's not just ticking boxes.
You're not just checking the box.
It's literally checking in. And one of the things that Cece said before we got started was teaching people like sort of this top-down method rather than the bottom-up kind of method. You want to kind of go into that in terms of how you're teaching somebody how to get into a particular movement pattern and how to do things correctly, so that over time we're layering these boxes onto the checklist with a high level of awareness of what we're actually checking as we're going down the boxes.
You know what it comes down to? It comes down to breaking the movement pattern and the exercise down into its individual or constituent parts before you then have them go into the full range of motion exercise. So the example that we were talking about earlier was, doing a Romanian deadlift versus doing a deadlift from the floor where you're having to overcome inertia. So if you take the Romanian deadlift, whether it's a bar, whether it's a dumbbell, whether it's a kettlebell, whatever the modality is, it's starting from the top. So it's starting with the postural awareness, loading the body, having to create a synergistic contraction in the body, and being able to create that tension, but then also being able to breathe. So checking in with your central nervous system, as well as respirations, and being able to hold that position before you then actually take the load through a range of motion. And when you do start to take that load through a range of motion, starting with a smaller range of motion first, and then integrating it into the larger whole. So what I mean by that is, maybe you're just going down to your knees and then you're coming back up. Whereas over time, you move down to your shins and then maybe you get closer to the floor before you actually put the implement on the floor, then try to overcome inertia. So something kind of like that.
That's a very good explanation.
And I think even for me, let's speak to the newbie here that I have to work with a lot of clients. There's two other tools that I'll use. Let's specifically think about a hip hinge. One is you may even need to take another joint out of it. Even just incorporating the knee joint is overwhelming, even in an RDL for some people. So I have to put them in a kneeling position, a tall kneeling, and I'm having them, learn to brace, learn to maintain a good trunk position. And how do they load their hips? How do they sit back onto their ankles and then extend? That might be where you're at. You may need to load that with a band or other modalities for a while. And then another thing I love, again, this is breaking it down even more, is sometimes I have to work just an isometric with someone. Sometimes I have to get them into a position I want. Maybe I get them down, even just doing a Romanian deadlift, getting them down to their knees. That's too much. That's too much going on. Maybe my first couple of weeks with you, or my couple of weeks maybe be a little too much, but maybe that first initial session, we're sitting into just that at the knee position. Mm-hmm. We're correcting, we're feeling how we can breathe and stabilize and own that before you go picking up from the floor. And there's all these steps that lead into it. Yep. So it's what's appropriate for the individual at that time.
Absolutely, yeah. And then not only that, but then also as far as what's happening in the upper body, what's happening with the head and the neck. So are we in a neutral spine? What's happening with our shoulders? Are we collapsing through the chest, or are we able to create tension and keep our chest open and our shoulders pulled back? So all preparing ourselves from an anatomical position to be able to accept a load.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the volley I just watched you guys have was there's a couple takeaways. One, Ryan, you were talking about the benefit of doing something that's a little bit more isolated and taking your joint out, but also the adaptation that your body will make in order to get the job done. Mm-hmm. So if you're picking that thing up from the floor, I don't care who you are, there's going to be strong points and weak points in that lift. We're talking most people, right? The professional lifter, Olympic lifter, whatever, maybe not so much. They've refined this. That's why they're at that level, the level that they're at. That's why they're competing at, Pan Am, Olympic, whatever international sport. That is not you who's listening to this podcast. So just stick with me here, right? There's going to be a point in that deadlift where you are overcompensating in one point, maybe over-recruiting or not recruiting enough in another area. And you should be aware of that, right? How do you train those things? Well, you break those weak points. Well, you would need to break the full complexity of that movement down into its constituent parts. This goes back to what Cece was saying. And if you did that from the get-go, like in your program, if you're just getting started or you're sort of an intermediate, novice to beginner-ish to intermediate lifter, this is a great place to spend some time to understand what those constituent parts feel like for you, because guess what it's going to do? It's going to expose where those weak points and strong points are. You want to know about that stuff. Why? Because you get further in and you're going through like your maximal strength phase down into your journey and down into your programming. Ultimately, you're going to find a limitation. You're going to reach whatever peak performance is for you in that stage. If you're chasing the 600-pound deadlift and you finally made 600 pounds, the difference between 600 and 625 pounds, that's an entirely fucking different program, right? And mindset than the person that was trying to get their deadlift from 100 pounds to 200 pounds. Way different. You're going to see way different incremental growth or let's just say surges in people's programs at the beginning, right? We've got neurological, we've got metabolic adaptation. You've got all kinds of things working sort of in your favor as a newbie. That's why we see these great gains. We see gains right off the bat. But for that person that's advanced, how are you going to get to 625? Well, it's not just going to be about going to the platform every time and continuing to lift. Let me throw another kilo or another pound on the bar. What are you going to have to do? You're going to have to back out of there, right? That basic, or again, that barbell deadlift on the platform, and you're going to have to incorporate movements that are the constituent parts of the thing that you are trying to do. If you learned what those were at the beginning, you learned how to impact yourself, and maybe if you learned, where your weak points were from the get-go, when you get there, you already know where you need to be next, and going back to things like top-down loaded movements like a Romanian deadlift, or things like rack pulls, where you're only pulling through a more limited range, which is going to really attack that weak point in your extension, when you're coming out of deadlift or whatever else. Those are things that you want to know. Those are not things you want to be discovering when you've already reached your quote-unquote max. At least that's not how I would want to be approaching it, because that doesn't leave you a lot of room to go. Now you're experimenting, not knowing if, number one, exploring movements or a portion of a movement pattern that you have not spent any time in, yet you applied the most complex compound thing you possibly could to your body for, an extended period of time, expecting or searching or reaching for a specific result. Now you got to come back out of that, and you got to kind of wade through all the stuff and kind of figure out the things. Sometimes to not learn as much as you could and really not get much benefit out of it. Sometimes to reach into, a particular movement pattern, having not a lot of awareness, maybe overload that and actually maybe do too much. And when I say overload, I just mean maybe do too much, overtrain, overreach, whatever it is, and wind up in an injured type of position, or whatever. But I guess my point of that is I want to know this stuff up front. And there's something. The other takeaway I want to talk about is the value that there is in isolation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I was just sitting here thinking about a previous conversation we had and valuing isolation and being able to own that movement pattern in its smallest form before you then layer it on the complexity, or as Ryan had said previously, add it to integrate. So, owning the isolation movement pattern to then integrate it later.
There's so many parts to that too, and how to do that. When we look at again, range of motion, what is the range, your range of motion? Where are you? Where might you be able to get to? And I really hesitate with this word, but I'll just say optimal for whatever your chosen goal is. Again, sometimes maybe a squat ass to grass isn't the best movement pattern for your chosen goal. I'm not going to suggest that it is. That's very individual. However, for most people, they could probably get the most benefit out of squatting if, by using the entire range of motion that they have and or achieving a better degree or better range if possible. But I think a lot of people measure this with I'm doing better with my squat by how much I can squat, not how do I squat or how do I deadlift? And meaning what is the quality of what I'm doing look like? And so right out of the gate, you start seeing these newbie gains, right? And this is great. And I'm lifting more than I was last week and the week before that and more than my buddies. And the next thing you know, you've trained yourself to be very strong through a shitty movement pattern. And then again, ultimately you're going to reach the end of that with regard to your total strength or power or whatever it is that you're training for. That's human physiology. You're going to get to the end of that. Then what do? Do you go back and you train partials or isolated movements with shitty movement patterns? Probably not, right? So why would you do that? Why would you do it in that order? That meaning if I keep overloading this big compound complex movement with shitty movement, but then I'm going to go back and I'm going to expect to adjust and make that better and gain more strength there by doing full range of motion, more isolated movements where I'm really focused on getting the most, quote unquote, optimally out of what I'm doing. Think about that for a second. And I think that's what I see a lot of people doing. They're going, well, I'll just go back and I'll do my corrective exercise now. No, you should have done that at the beginning. And what that doesn't necessarily mean rehabilitation corrective exercise. That means learning how to do something correctly from the get-go would be my argument.
When I always tell people, it's much harder for me as a coach to help someone unlearn something and relearn a motor pattern than someone who has no prior experience with it, and then me trying to teach it to them for the first time, and to some degree, right? So the person who's been squatting maybe the most, let's say, not optimal way for a long time, and then I'm trying to correct certain things, and I'm trying to change basically how they've been walking, right? If you think it's something that they do all the time,
they've been conditioned
to do it. That's a lot more challenging for me. So
it's like your kid or your dog, right? Mm-hmm. Try to break a bad behavior that you reinforced for so long. It's much tougher than to teach it up front, and set that as the expectation. So. Again, the purpose of the conversation was to kind of revisit what that programming could look like for you, depending on where you are on your journey. So whether you're the intermediate to novice, or novice, I'll call novice somebody who's never touched weights before, right? I think there's kind of 4 levels here. Beginner, which is what you'd move to from novice as you're starting to kind of figure things out. Then to intermediate. And that time period is probably, that novice to beginner is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about a year, consistently working, 3, 4, 5, even 6 days a week at something, you're still a beginner in a year. But you're still going through neurological adaptation and metabolic adaptation likely in a way that you'll never go through again if you continue on your journey. So after you've kind of gone through this novice beginner stage, then you move into more of an intermediate stage. This is now you've been in a program long enough to kind of understand how things impact you. Your body is responsive to different things. You maybe understand a little bit more about periodization and programming, and you're starting to now implement that in a little bit better way into let's say a more specific way into your programming. Intermediate lifters, in order to really go through, I think, really kind of come out the other end of that intermediate stage, you're looking at maybe another 2 to 3 years. That's my personal opinion. I don't care how much you can lift. I'm talking about where you are in your developmental process. If you wanted to compare athletes, I mean, look at like a bodybuilder. Like bodybuilders, your professional bodybuilders that are winning on stage, these are the guys that have built the most amount of muscle, however they did it, right? They built the most amount of muscle and, over time. They're not doing that in a 2 or 3 year period. It takes a decade from the time they started to the time to the time they're actually winning and maybe even professional at that point to get there in most cases. Bodybuilders, when we start getting into like physique and bikini and stuff, like it's a different story. It's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about, with all due respect, the freaks that are on stage. It takes a decade to get there.
Yeah.
So as you start to move out of your intermediate phase, then you're moving into more of your advanced, right? Or your advanced or more experienced lifter. And you're 5 years into your journey, at this point. So when I look at like, how does this apply, what we're talking about, to people in the different stages of their journey? I think it's very applicable to every single one of them. And I think there are some solutions or some things people might be wanting to think about as they go into that, as it relates to their programming and how to get the most out of it, based on the things that we're kind of talking about. Again, the benefits of isolation, the benefits of breaking down movement patterns into their, or exercises into their constituent parts to ultimately get better. And obviously the value in those big compound complex movements and getting the most out of that you possibly can. So I think what we're looking at is like programming. How do you approach it? And I think you just kind of, you hit a keynote there, Ryan, with regard to like the starting point for your newer person. And that was, let's condition things the right way from the get-go and instead of having to untangle that web, or, lack of a better term, having to unfuck yourself down the road. So what would that kind of look like? Like in your mind, like just in terms of how you might put together somebody's program in the first few months, like to train and build this awareness, build this capacity, build strength, all the things that most people are looking for, and some of the things that they don't quite understand yet. What do things look like sort of at the get-go?
Well, for me, so I mean, when I think of progressing someone's program, excuse me, when I think of progressing someone's program, yes, I am progressively overloading that, right? I am adding more weight. I am adding more intention with that. But I really love a lot of especially for my newer people, I'm progressing their movement, right? I'm adding new ranges of motion. Maybe I'm starting them, let's say a squat. Maybe they're just starting at a high box squat. And that's what they have that feedback. They have that tactile feedback of what range of motion. They're owning that range of motion. Their joints are getting used to that. I'm working on isolating things. I'm working on developing things that I see as weak points in their movement or weak points in development, right? Then into their next block, right? Maybe they're there for 4 or 5 weeks and they're doing that same movement. Yeah, we're progressing it a little bit with some load. Then I'm adding them more range of motion, or I'm taking away a component, right? Maybe they're getting rid of the box now, but they're still doing a goblet squat, or they're still doing a Romanian deadlift, but I'm adding a little bit more range of motion. Now I'm progressing in that. Can they add load? Can we build in that? And then I'm slowly building these more advanced movement patterns, but a lot of that is also just ranges of motion. But I think it's also important to remember that even for the most advanced, and even as my clients advance, you still need to do some of the isolation work, right? The pros, the top of the top in any sport or any let's just say sport, they're masters at the basics. You still need to be able to do the basics to be able to do the advanced shit, right? You need to be able to still fire the specific muscle to help stabilize. Like if you have no connection, let's just say with your glute med, right? And then you're trying to do this single leg balance on a whatever in in a drop transition, whatever, but you still have a really weak left glute med, like you need to develop that quality tissue to be able to do that effectively. So I think that's how I progress a lot through movements, maintaining isolation. Maybe they're progressing in the loading. Maybe it's changing the loading. Maybe then in a few months in, now we're introducing the barbell. Now we're introducing these other more advanced ways of executing the exercise.
Yeah,
Well said.
yeah. I think it's a great. You started kind of with the box squat as an example. I really like that because of the reasons you said. You know, you're making somebody very aware of what they're doing, while also giving them sort of a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really a crutch. It's more of like
Giving somebody for some biofeedback.
Yeah, it's awareness. It's like, okay, here's what I do. Here's what I do. Here's where I go to in this movement. Here's where I don't go to in this movement. And it's a squat. That's what it is.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think people are really, really unaware of how unaware they are of their body.
For sure.
Really, like
this goes for every single person in the spectrum that I just outlined there, from novice to advanced.
And I think let's define, like, awareness is the picture in your head of your body in space. So if you raise your arm up and you say, this is at the height of my arm, that's where you know where your arm actually is. That's awareness, right? And then proprioception is that actual, like, it's more of a tactile feedback. You have awareness, you can feel that area, right? So people have very little awareness of the awareness of their body. So, and I see this a lot with new coaches or new lifters or new participants of, giving the cue of just, squeeze your shoulder blades, retract your shoulder blades, retract. They have no awareness. They don't know what that even feels like. So the right exercise prescribed might be, we love doing this, just scapular protraction, retraction, maybe unloaded initially. So they build some proprioception and awareness.
Yeah, that ties right into what I was going to say just about that box squat as an example. Like, I love where you kind of went with that and how it progresses. I'm going to keep giving them that, you said like maybe it's a 4 to 5 week block. Maybe 1 week they're holding a kettlebell. Mm-hmm. Maybe the next week they're double front racked with dumbbells. Maybe they're double front racked with kettlebells. Maybe maybe it's a very light, like aluminum barbell in a front rack position. What I'm doing is I'm giving them, while they're working on the squat pattern, right? And that meaning, again, most people at that point are really going to be focused on just sitting down and standing up as you're working through your different range and whatever else. As I'm drilling that in, where a lot of people's limitation ends up lying is what's going on in that upper extremity, the thoracic and spine, and then also getting into the shoulder girdle. As we start to get more complex and we're starting to load heavier, obviously something has to take that load, right? Unless you're inverting that and you're flipping it and you're doing like a leg press, or like a hip sled type of exercise, which has a ton of value for the reasons I'm saying right now, where you can get them to really focus on the hip, knee, and ankle extension and not so much worry about what their upper body posture is or isn't doing, because you're taking some risk out of it at that point. But going back to the box squat, I'm going to hand them these different modalities and I'm going to get them to understand where their shoulders are, where their posture is, right? Because those, not only is this is going to come up, and then again, as you start to lower the box or take the box away, I can revisit all of these things, and they've already learned what it feels like to have those things in their hands, right? And what that feels like on their upper body to feel loaded that way. And there's that heightened sense of awareness. I am still getting the benefit of doing the squat, building the muscle and building the capacity, right? And getting them maybe closer to doing a more heavily loaded barbell back squat, if that is a goal within the program. But I can still get all of those benefits, right, through that, number one, isolating parts of that movement, using smaller, pieces modalities, pieces of equipment, giving them the feel so that they understand, again, going back to awareness and proprioception, giving them a feel so that when we get down the road, then I can really load them with those types of things in different ways. And I'll give you an example, like ultimately, like that front-loaded dumbbell front squat, right? One of the more popular exercises I see out there is the thruster, right? Which is the squat to overhead press with the dumbbells, a dumbbell thruster, right? Like if I don't have awareness, if all I've done is a barbell back squat and I did that with a barbell, right? And maybe I got really strong. And then I did, an overhead dumbbell press or barbell press for that matter, like a military press. And I got really strong. And now I'm asking them or my client or myself to do a dumbbell thruster. Like that is a very complex, like you need to have a high level of awareness as you're going through there. And the other thing that I see people doing is they get really surprised really quick at how much little or how much less weight they have to use, right, in that movement, because they start to fall apart, right, when it's programmed into some type of a workout. And I guess what I'm saying there is like, I was able to do that front squat to the box, or a very controlled front squat with, let's say, 60s in each hand. That's a good amount of load. 120 pounds, a lot of weight up front for most people, I would say. But then when I go to the bar, and then I'm over and I'm maybe doing 50 pounds overhead with my seated dumbbell overhead press, or let's call it 100 pounds of my barbell military press or something like that. But now I go to the squat thruster, which is just a combination of those very two movements, and they recognize, shit, I can only do, 35 pounds each hand or 40 pounds each hand in this, which is not even close to what I could squat, and very much less than what I could, or it's still very much less than what I could overhead press. What gives? And it's all the things happening in between those two movements. And if they had that awareness from the get-go, right, and they understood what was going on, and we practiced those things, I think people would have a lot more success right off the bat, maybe not hurt themselves, maybe not get into these shitty movement patterns, because ultimately what drives the whole thing is like, how much weight am I using, right? Some of this is pre-prescribed, depending on, like, you're doing like a CrossFit workout and there's a male versus a female, requirement or something like that. My whole point of this is being able to put the pieces together early, so that when you come back to revisit them as an advanced lift, it's very, very natural to you, and you understand. And it's also challenging you in a different way, and you understand and you're aware of what that challenge is and why you're doing that movement.
Yes. I mean, the other thing is too, you're talking about these two movements that seem very similar and then putting them together. But when you're doing them in their isolated parts, they're very different movements.
Absolutely.
Right?
They're not the same.
Yeah, they're not the same.
They're not the same.
They look the same. They look very similar.
So again, I'm not saying that, that sounds contradictory, Scott. What you said is, like, isolation is important, and you can get a lot of value from it. 100%.
You're right.
100% you can. That's why we're doing it, so that when you back out of it and you go back into your isolation movements, like, you understand the value that's there and how to perform that better to get the most out of it. Everything should be about progression, right? To progress whatever it is, the long term or the bigger goal is. Again, and if that's a barbell back squat, shit, you can get a ton out of a front loaded dumbbell squat, single leg, Bulgarian, all kinds of different things that if you didn't teach yourself how to do that at the beginning, very tough from a mindset perspective, but also posturally, strength wise, capacity wise, in order to do those things later in the game. Again, to uncondition yourself from, what you'd been doing for so long.
The other thing that we haven't touched on, which we've talked about on other podcasts, and which, I know a lot of our clients would say, they would agree with this, is tempo. We haven't talked about that.
Nope.
But that's so critical when you're talking about making sure that you're creating positive movement patterns, because when you slow things down or you stop and hold and create an isometric kind of position and creating tension throughout the body and learning to own that position, not just muscularly, but like from a joint perspective as well, and then going back to awareness and going back to proprioception, I think tempo is a really critical point that gets overlooked in a lot of programming.
Yeah, it generally starts to get programmed in. Like, so if I look at like programming and kind of breaking it down, if I look at like physique programming, like bodybuilding type programming, usually comes in like right from the get-go, everything's very slow, very controlled, right? And then later on down the road, it's still the same. I mean, we're talking like time under tension. We're not working through high tempo, explosive, or even power type movements for most bodybuilding. It's the same all the time, right? So that's kind of one way of looking at it that people could, it's these 2-1-2 type of tempos, or 3-1-3 type tempos. That's 3 to the bottom in the eccentric, a pause at the bottom for 1, maybe 2 seconds, and then back up. Like, or you're just doing sort of an even rhythm of like a 2-2 or a 3-3 type tempo, something like that. That's probably very familiar to people, right? And then when I get into like powerlifting, the thing that gets implemented first is speed, right? Because that's really what if you're going to enter into the deadlift competition, that's what you're doing. You're trying to lift that weight as fast as you can. I mean, I know it looks slow, but the intent is to lift it as fast as you can. So you are building this contraction, and you're trying to do it very, very quickly and effectively rip that thing off the floor. It doesn't look like that. And how you do that's very important, but the intention is to move it very fast. The slow pieces don't usually enter into the equation at all. And, a lot of that, again, going back to what you said, is it's from the floor up versus the top down. So we just lift as fast as we can from the platform to our hips. And then what happens? We drop the bar. Yeah, we're not working like a slow eccentric contraction.
Yeah, there's no eccentric component to that. And to go back, I can confirm our clients are very well aware because they curse your name every time you program.
Tempo. Yeah.
I think we're in 12s with a 3-1-1 tempo right now.
And that's just to get them, because I know our demographic, just to get them to slow down.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of rush through, the movement pattern that they're trying to get through.
Well, and I think it's, like you said, it's learning to have tension in different ranges before you introduce other ranges that you don't have any tension, which, again, pulling from the floor and never doing the eccentric component, how are you actually able to find that tension? A lot of people struggle to find the tension on the floor. But I think kind of where you're pointing with this is to have a well-balanced training program and a well-balanced outcome, you need to be able to do both. You probably need to have some degree to be able
100%.
to control the movement, to have tension, to have a lot of mechanical tension, to have a lot of good activation. But sometimes you also need to be able to move some shit quick.
Yep.
Right. You need to be able to do that. You need to be able to maximize all these other attributes of fitness, these domains of fitness, to get the best maximal result. And I think so many people get pigeonholed into their style of training, and they stay in their rep range, they stay in their cadence, they stay in their given modality and exercise, and they stay in their given range of motion. They never transfer outside of that, which life isn't like that.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's largely driven by what we've talked about even just recently on the show. It comes from the bodybuilding world, and a lot of it is being driven by the kids. And when I say the kids, I just mean a very youthful, population that has not had a lot of experience, that is getting a result, a physical result from this training because they are beginners. When you look at it, the reality is they're still inside that 5-year, not even close to being advanced yet in my mind. Again, nobody's going to define that. Like, that's my own definition of it. But they're still very, very early into it. And then they're moving into, maybe they are 6-7 years in, but they still haven't peaked yet. Right. So we're not talking about like that person that's been doing this for 20 years, right? Who's been working out and gone through all different stages of their health and fitness, program, from success to failure to injury to all the things that come along with that, and has had to make these adaptations in their programming and understands maybe how those adaptations work, but is now looking back going, damn, if I just approached this a little bit differently from the get-go, I may not be in this position now where I feel I have a limitation that I'm having a tough time overcoming, or can't overcome for that matter, whether that's orthopedic to something else, whatever's going on there. So yeah, I am getting to like, how do you program this for the right person? This is, or for those different populations. And I think it really starts from the get-go. And again, it being what we see, the majority of this stuff being driven through would be, one, the bodybuilding world, like the physique world, this aesthetic, I guess, intention. The other one for a long time was like CrossFit, right? And that type of programming. And that was, again, by the definition, it was random and varied, and it was very much misunderstood by, I would say, most CrossFitters. Now, I know some very intelligent, very fit, very amazing coaches and athletes within the CrossFit world that do understand human performance and how to apply those things. But in general, I think what we ended up seeing a lot of was just random stuff being put together to hopefully hit different energy systems and get you to an end result, which was to complete the WOD for the day. I'm not bad-mouthing CrossFit. That's just my honest opinion of what was going on. Those two things were driving things for a long time. Well, we've seen kind of CrossFit go away a bit, right?
Well, do you think powerlifting was as well?
I think powerlifting has been influencing things for a very long time, and it's starting to reemerge.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, me
totally.
too. That's why I was bringing it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what you have is you have people kind of planting flags in the thing that they're going to do, rather than looking at it like we prefer to look at it, which is a little bit more of a holistic approach to, well, how do I get as strong, as fit, as fast, as mobile, right, as I can for all things? And that way I'm set for, if I wanted to enter a powerlifting meet and I wanted to enter or a competition or something like that, then I could easily shift right into that type of programming. But I have this base underneath me that allows me to be, quote unquote, fit for action, which is actually one of the names of one of our programs. But it allows me to do these other things. I would also do that with a high level of understanding that as I go that route, that means these other domains of my fitness, if we're looking at all the things, are probably going to be diminished, right? Because those aren't the focus anymore.
Well, and I think something to say with that is a lot of people aren't aware that those, even though, yes, at the end of the day, if you're going to enter a powerlifting meet, you need to train in that style for a while. But these other types of fitness, these other domains of fitness support that. Like, I think for me, right, I trained in that style for a long time, but I really, really ignored my cardio, my conditioning, my aerobic work, my anaerobic work, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times my recovery was shitty,
yeah.
Right. And developing those types of things, your aerobic system, your cardiovascular system, all those other things can really, really help improve your recovery so that, yeah, you can do your 10 sets of 2 at your deadlift and that be your main block when you're going to a powerlifting meet, but it helps your recovery and your ability to apply that performance in that. So they support each other, but a lot of people aren't aware of that. So.
Yes, this goes back to, choosing exercises and defining their fitness based on the exercise versus defining what fitness is sort of in a larger scale and understanding what maybe exercises I need to do in order to achieve this as a whole. And again, I'm not to like, if you want to be a powerlifter, go be a powerlifter, right? Go do that. Go explore that for a while. But it isn't the answer to total fitness if that's what you're looking for. By the way, so let's break this down into, let's be practical about this. If you're doing this as a hobby and you just really love doing it, and I'm not going to take anything away from you, but if you're choosing powerlifting as your as the means to how you program your workouts, and you're like a jiu-jitsu athlete, I'm telling you, that's probably not a wise decision. There are better things for you to be doing than choosing powerlifting and then going and doing jiu-jitsu if you intend on being great on the mat. You want to be the best athlete on the mat. Powerlifting can be supportive, but I wouldn't be spending too much time there. If I'm a tactical athlete, if I'm a person that makes a living with a gun, if I'm a firefighter, if I'm in law enforcement or something like that, and I've chosen powerlifting as my mode of exercise that's how I define my fitness, I think that's a big mistake. I think you're missing a lot of things. And if you talk to enough guys, right? Individuals that are in this, they will tell you the limitations. You just outlined a few of those, right? Like what are your job requirements and how does this play in? Yes, being strong is important. Being able to move is probably more important, right?
Being able to react, being nimble, being quick, being able to move laterally, being able to
rotate,
being able to keep having endurance, right? Being able to sprint, being able to run for long periods. Being able to swim. Those are all things that are important there. Powerlifting is very limiting. It can be very beneficial for building power and strength, but it can be very, very limiting other places. If you're a volleyball player and you've chosen CrossFit as your mode of exercise in order to become a better volleyball player, I'm telling you, it's probably not a wise decision. I'm not telling you to not do CrossFit. I'm just saying, if you want to be the best volleyball player you can, you might think about this a little differently. Now, those are kind of two different people. But if you're just the person that just wants to be generally fit, healthier, and you're anywhere in these stages, I think there's a time and a place for all the stuff that we've talked about. So I want to be very, very clear with that. But when I look back and kind of look like how we would program or how we program stuff, we get a lot of questions about this, particularly like in our total body strength and conditioning program that's on our online membership, or RDF Strong, they're very similar in how we've programmed things from the beginning to the end. And it really does. Our thought process on this is like, let's handle the important stuff up front. Like, we understand people want to build muscle and they want to build strength. But what sets them up for the right foundation for that? And oftentimes, again, going back to the very beginning of this podcast, I think what we put out looks a bit different than a lot of other quote unquote templates that you could buy. And Ryan's over there nodding his head, probably because you bought a few templates before and you understand what we're talking about. I mean, what jumps off the page at you, like right out of the gate, like with our Strong and like TBSC program as compared to your general like muscle building program that you may have tried before in the past?
Well, I mean, I think in the first block, there's only one barbell movement, and I think it might be a barbell RDL.
Yep.
So for me, someone in the past coming from a powerlifting program background, like a lot of what I saw was barbell, barbell, barbell. So that was something that jumped out at me right now. Hey, I'm not using the barbell except for like one movement in this first whole 4 weeks. So I think that jumped out at me really quickly.
Yeah, for as a writer of that program and the business owner sort of behind the program, I recognized that was actually frustrating for the new consumer, the new user. And so we had to kind of talk them through like, hey, be patient. It's coming. It's 4 weeks without the barbell. You're going to be okay. Just trust me here. And then those things start to get layered in. But we're going through the basic movement patterns, utilizing all the stuff that we've kind of already talked about. Maybe it's dumbbells, maybe it's kettlebells. We're introducing different implements. Part of that is we recognize a lot of people that get into that program because it is more for your beginner to intermediate type exerciser, or even a novice could do this. And we tried to keep that strong program available to the novice, but they're going to want to have some familiarity, a little bit of familiarity, a few months under their belt, in the weight room, and understanding their way around is going to be very helpful. But the point of that is like we are loading that squat pattern. We are doing with all different kinds of stuff because all different kinds of stuff come up later in your program. And as volume increases and intensity may increase, or as we make those adjustments, going back to what you're saying, the volume, tempo, and the other types of variables. But that was one of the things that I was kind of wrestling with right from the get-go is people like, oh, but like I'm using barbells now. I'm like, cool, we'll use barbells. Just chill for a minute. Let's visit some things first and just trust me with this. Like as you get through there. That was one of the things that kind of jumped off right for me too.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at it for me as a coach, understanding so much of the nuance in that program of things that support other things or that lead into other things or that develop this pattern to before you change the force, right? I don't know, doing a lateral lunge before you do an alternating lateral lunge, just things like that. There's all this nuance but even for me, for someone, when I ran that a few years ago as a primary program, and I ran through it, I had done barbell work for years. And it was honestly, after a while, like that kind of stuff can feel compressive, can feel really draining. So even for someone who is maybe more advanced, giving your body a little bit of a break from axial loading, from loading overhead, from compressing your spine, changing the motor pattern, changing the movement pattern can be something that actually feels really, really great.
And I think it helps to create a new awareness as far as where that modality is, especially if you're holding two individual dumbbells or kettlebells versus holding a barbell, bringing back the whole awareness and the proprioception component as far as where's your body in space and how are you managing those implements as you're moving your body through space, how are they in relation to your body? Are you keeping them close? Are they out to your sides, keeping them in a more of a neutral position or whatever, maybe happening with that exercise. So.
Yeah, I think, again, so people had to practice a little patience going through there. And, with all the program hopping that goes around out there, or that goes on out there, and we've all been guilty of it at some level, and recognize that that's just kind of human nature. It does look a little different as you're getting into it. But if you really examine it, as we've broken it out, it really is prepping you for the future and hopefully preventing you from going through some of the frustration or the challenges that we sort of opened up the podcast with. And there are a lot of other programs from a lot of other people that do this as well. We're not reinventing the wheel, or we didn't invent anything here. What we did is we just looked at it from maybe a different approach. And the approach being like, let's get people started with a really strong foundation to build from. But also in that foundation is not just the exercises they do, the strength they build, it's the awareness that they gain from doing that. And again, sometimes I look at it and go, oh, I'm doing a different squat this week than I was doing last week. No, you're doing a squat. You're just holding a different piece of equipment this time, maybe in a slightly different way. You're not having to learn anything new. You just grab something. You're literally grabbing something different to do with that squat pattern. And so part of that also provided flexibility for people. Right? Maybe because they had a limitation where doing that front rack kettlebell hold or position, they couldn't do it for whatever reason. They got a shoulder problem, or they got a wrist or arm problem, or something that was preventing them for. Cool. There's all these other things we're teaching you as you go through there. So now you're building awareness, you're being educated, you're building some confidence in making decisions for yourself so that you can see those things coming down the road and understand, particularly when things get quote unquote hard, right? Later on, where intensity picks up, where we're really challenging your body in a much different way. outside of this sort of conditioning phase that we're going through here, so we really start to get into like a beyond the hypertrophy and really get into a strength phase, is okay, I recognize where my challenges are with that. On this particular day, which is a higher intensity day, I can choose the more complex compound movement and really hit that hard this way because I'm really confident there. And I also know here's how I do my Romanian deadlift. Right, or my Romanian, my Bulgarian split squat. Sorry, I can get the BLG. If I can get like instead of doing like a kettlebell front racked Bulgarian split squat, really struggling with that. I understand now that what I should be loading with and how to load with a couple of dumbbells at my sides, holding them neutral and getting the exact same thing for my lower extremity out of that. I'm just able to work around maybe my upper extremity limitations that we worked on, but I'm still challenged by. And as I go back to that conditioning and again, establishing those foundational movements again at the end of the program, now I know what I can go back and focus on. It was a sort of a paradigm, but more of like a cyclical way of looking at your workouts. Like you could continue to repeat this program, this 4-month program over time, over and over and over again. And each time you do it, you could add maybe different exercises because you learned how to do them, right? And you're going to get increased benefit each time you go through it, as long as you're paying attention.
You said you could change the exercise, or you mean the modality?
No, you could change the modality. You could change the modality. You can change the exercise.
By
still do the same. Do the same movement pattern, right? But you're
manipulating the modality or the execution.
Because you learned how to do it all.
Yeah.
You weren't restricted to like what you were saying. And again, there's nothing wrong with the barbell, but barbell this, barbell that, barbell this, barbell that. There were all these things that you learned along the way. I think a lot of people get caught in the trap of doing the thing that they know and the thing that they think they do really well and they think provides them the most benefit, when the reality of it is it's really all they know, right? Because they haven't really explored anything else.
Well, and one quick comment about that, and then I have another point was, I think a lot of coaches apply the thing they know to their new coaches, apply the thing they know to their clients instead of what is that individual, what's their goals, what's their morphology, all this different stuff. So that's just a comment. But what I also really love kind of on top of all this with the program is a lot of the thing that, like let's take the goblet squat, the dumbbell goblet squat, which is your primary squat initially in block 1, becomes an ancillary or secondary squat in the block 2. So it's a movement you already know. You already can keep figuring that out, keep progressing with that. But now you're adding into this new intention or motor or modality, right? Or like the barbell RDL in the second block becomes a secondary hinge pattern for you instead of your primary. So I love that because it kind of repeats in itself, bleeds in itself, grows on itself in that way.
Yeah, I think most smart coaches would be like, yes, of course, that's how it should be. But there's obviously so much room to be selling all different types of programs. I'm not saying they're all bad. You know, when you see this repetitive stuff over and over and over again, the question you should be asking yourself as a consumer is, where do I go from here? Because this is a very short period of time, whether it's a 4-month program, 3-month program, 6-month program, whatever. What's next? And you should be thinking about that as the consumer, and so should the coach, for the benefit of the consumer / client, whatever else. But also, let's think about this from like a business perspective. Like if you just said this is the answer when you know damn well it's not the answer, like it's part of a larger answer for you, then you've just pigeonholed yourself, going back to that term, pigeonholing yourself. And as a result, so is the client, right? Because then they're program hopping to something else that may be of equal or lesser quality in terms of, the time, the effort, and the knowledge and wisdom that's been put into the program. And as people are searching for these things, they're looking for the right program for them. And they also have to keep in mind that this is not an individualized program for you. So this is a generalized format that's working maybe within a framework. Sometimes it's not much of a framework. It's a total template. And I think there's two different things there. But you get yourself into this framework where you begin to learn how to make adjustments for yourself and learn how to make informed decisions on what the next thing should be for you. So like you may be graduating to, hey, I've been doing this sort of total body strength conditioning program for a while. We then have physique, right? Which is like, okay, you've really established these. You really want to put on some muscle. You want to really work that aesthetic stuff, look good naked kind of thing. Look, we have that program. That's a lot more isolation work. You've learned how to do that. You're also very strong, so you can maximize those isolated movements while you're doing them because you've been through the strength and conditioning program. You have the motor or the engine, the cardiovascular capacity, because there's a little bit of that programmed into there, so that you are recovering. You learn about these things, and then ultimately, so you're working through isolation in a lot of cases in order to build bigger, stronger muscles, right? You could do that forever if you wanted. You could cycle back through there if that's what you want, but understand there are some limitations there. But there's a progression, I think, is the way a consumer should be looking at it, and an exercise should be looking like, where do I go from here? Are these just randomized programs like fit and lean? What the fuck does that even mean? Right? Like, what does that mean? Like, beach body, grind, hit. Like
strength and tone.
Strength and tone.
Strength.
Yeah. How does all this fit together? Beast mode. What is this? Like, you got to dig into the program and understand what it is. And I recognize as a consumer that doesn't necessarily understand all the things that we're talking about, how overwhelming that could be. But, most smart coaches out there are people that do this for a living, not just as a hobby, and will continue to make a living on this until they don't want to anymore. They're putting in the effort to not only programming it that way, but also explaining it and putting the detail into the programs for their client. And a lot of them, in one way or another, are making themselves available to their customer in some way to ask questions, to get into some kind of maybe a group chat, maybe let people like the Facebook forum, they can use that there. I've seen people use like private Instagram pages where they'll do lives and stuff through there. Those I think are good things for you to be looking for as a consumer with regard to, if I purchase this program and I run into something, question, or I need a little bit of help here, where do I go? Who's available for you? So again, that goes from the beginner, all the way up to the advanced lifter. I think as you get more advanced, you want to have more access, right? That would just be my preference for a coach. As a coach, I know that things get a lot more detailed and a lot more nuanced as we get into that advanced lifter, because they got a lot, or exercise, they got a lot more going on. And particularly if I'm doing a program to meet a very specific job requirement, or again, need or goal specific to like a sports goal or a competition goal or something like that. But like if you're doing this as a job, to help you with your job, you owe it to yourself to dig in here. Right? I was just having this conversation with my buddy Jake Labhart, who's in Extremist Performance, got a great team out there. And he works with basically the tactical athlete, that person that does make their living behind a gun, at the federal, local, state and levels. And he works with a lot of instructors. And we were just kind of having this conversation about what it means to be a professional and choosing programming from an SME or a subject matter expert that understands your fitness programming. And as that consumer of that, as that tactical professional or whatever you want to call yourself, whether it's law enforcement or it's not so much tactical, it's firefighter, it's a paramedic, you depend on your body and other people depend on your body to get through your day and get the job done. You owe it to yourself. There's a responsibility there to make sure that the programming you're getting is the best programming you can possibly get for whatever your criteria is. And those people do exist out there. But my point's being about being able to reach out and talk to the person behind the programming, get some questions answered. Is this the right programming for me? I think is really important. That's what I wanted to bring to the table today, because again, going back to this other conversation I was having with all these people are just randomly grabbing at programs because they sound good and they look familiar. Maybe the answer to your ultimate goal or to your problem or the solution to your fitness is something that's going to look a little atypical. And my suggestion is that maybe pay a little bit more attention to a lot of the things that we've spoken about here today, and not get married to the what looks familiar and what looks quote unquote comfortable. Again, going back to the barbell this, barbell that makes good logical sense, or rational logical sense. But when you really start to peel back the layers of the onion on that stuff, all the things that we've talked about, I think there's some missing pieces there. And you should be thinking that too. And I'm not saying you're wrong for doing barbell work. Fuck. That's not what I'm saying. We do a ton of it. I do barbell work, but I also recognize there's limitations there that comes along with any value that you may be able to extract.
There's limitations, but then also there's evolution as far as where you are at a certain point in your career and in your health and fitness journey. So, I mean, things happen, life happens.
Yeah, I want to be also careful with that with regard to evolution and how people can maybe overdo that, and like you see some of these programs that are really wacky. Like it's circus tricks, and there's danger, I think, in purchasing programs that have somebody that's trying to do too many things, right? And separate themselves from the pack or the crowd as that person that's uber creative or whatever. Look, there are basics, fundamentals that we need to be talking about. I don't want to undervalue or underplay those fundamentals, but at the same, by saying that they're basics, but not everybody understands those basics the way they probably should. And the person that needs to understand the basics for themselves at the highest level they possibly can is the person using the program. So get yourself into a program that does that, and ask some questions. And there's a lot of good people. I mentioned Jake and his team out there. He works with some pretty outstanding people. Super, super smart guy. I've had Jeff Nichols on the show. We talked to Jeff and Catherine out there in Virginia Beach, Performance First. They're amazing. There's the list goes on. I mean, we've had plenty of them on the show, but also done some other posts and other work with a lot of people. So ask those questions. If you guys are looking for a little bit more information on what we have to offer, I've already talked about our online membership, which includes the total body strength and conditioning, the physique program, and the Fit for Action program. Those are for all those different levels of people. Anybody could benefit by any of those programs, but they are sort of nuanced to where are you in your fitness journey and what are your specific needs. There's exercise libraries there for mobility and cardiovascular, and Metcon work. And there's also like body weight type movements if you're on the road or if you're looking for more calisthenic work that can augment and enhance the programs that you're on. And of course, there's our RDF Strong, which is our most popular muscle building and strength program. It's a 4-month, very periodized program for people that really like that type of an application. And we also have RDF Max, which is very similar to FFA in that, again, another 4-month program that focuses primarily on really enhancing your athletic ability through strength, hypertrophy, and power.
And if you're interested as well, we also work one-on-one with clients virtually. If you're not in the local area, if you want something more individualized as far as programming and progressions and all that, we do that as well. So
yeah, it's easy to get. I mean, even if you just want to chat for a minute, you can reach out to us. Go to rdftrainonline.com. There's a contact page there. Hit us up. Just say you want to chat about whatever, and we will get right back to you. They are real humans working here. There's no bots. I don't offshore these fucking calls to Malaysia or some shit like that. You're going to talk to one of our staff. They're eager and wanting to help and willing to help. You can talk to Ryan if you want. We'll just schedule an appointment. You can do that right on the page too if you like. Just directly schedule an appointment when we get you set up. The other thing you can do is when you're at rdftrainonline.com, you can go to the online membership page. You can download a free week. Get a look at what we have to offer there. We're currently going through some pretty exciting transitions on there, I think, to kind of simplify things for our customers based on the feedback that we've gotten from them. But if you go there, download the free week, you're then going to get a 20% off discount code if you decide to continue your membership purchase a membership. You can do it that way. Or if you like the more linear, periodized, like I want to just see 4 months out of advance, I want it all in front of me, and you want Strong or Max, check those out. You can use the code STRONG20 or Max20 respectively to get 20% off those programs as well. But again, any questions on any of that stuff, just reach out to us and we'll direct you to where we think, that might benefit you the most, or just have some dialogue about it. Or if we can't help you, we're happy to send you to somebody that may be able to do that for you. Again, going back to some of those people that have very, very specific job requirements. There are people that are going through like selection processes for certain units or things like that. That's not us. That's not what we do. We know some the top-notch people, to reach out to for that stuff. That is an easy connection to make. So happy to do that as well.